Welcome back to Dream Loudly, an Impossible Original show presented by the Dream Loudly Foundation. And in today's episode, Bryce Stanhope and I are going to be going over a topic we've been discussing a lot, which is the concept of team versus dream. Now, as we jump into this concept, I just want to kind of remind everybody of what we're talking about. So I'm going to start off with a story. So in this case, I'll actually just say who it is because this will make a lot of sense for people who understood. So Mike Benajay, who started out at Duke University when I was living in the Raleigh-Durham area, started coming to me for training when he was at Duke. So he was a freshman on the team, very athletic player, long and lengthy, and Duke specifically recruited him to be more of a role player, it seemed. He was very locked in a role. They didn't give him a lot of opportunities to handle the ball. They did not train him to handle the ball. It was almost as if the training for Mike was all boxed in around the role that they gave him, which we see all the time. And a lot of people are surprised that happens, but a lot of times when you get to a team, it's so team, that the player is just basically locked in on training towards that role for the good of the team. And we always get this, of coaches who will reach out to us and say, hey, this is a team game. And so there's this mindset that players are supposed to sacrifice whatever they want for the good of the team, and if they don't, then that's selfish. So to go back into the Mike Benajay situation, we're training there, and he's training in secret because he's not allowed to train the things that we're training. We're training on ball handling. We're training on shooting. We're training all against the things that Duke really doesn't want him to do. And it's not necessarily a whole negative thing about Duke and Coach K or anything like that. This is how a lot of teams are designed, and this is how a lot of coaches have their systems designed, is they have to have some role players in order for the team to win. But regardless of this, we're training Mike in secret, like we do all the time, that we have these underground training sessions because the players know they can't publicly train with us because they're going against the coach's wishes. Long story short, Mike Benajay has the opportunity to transfer to Syracuse, where he ends up being the point guard on the Final Four team. Then he goes on to play for the Detroit Pistons. In my opinion and my belief of working with Mike through that whole process, there's no way he could have ever made it to the NBA if he would have stayed at Duke under that current role.
Yeah, you would have got stuck.
That role would have cemented in him as a team player at Duke. He would have sacrificed his dream for the good of the team. And that's really the best example that I have on it because they never would have looked at him as someone who ever could have been a point guard. There's no way they would have ever thought he could handle the ball good enough or shoot good enough in order to make that happen. We trained for that stuff in secret, planning to make him a point guard. Then he transfers to Syracuse and makes it all happen. So this is a negative that a lot of players deal with. The team versus dream battle is something that we have to talk about. And we've talked about a lot about players, but we also need to go over, I think, of the conflict of the coach's side too and give everybody a solution.
Well, I think, obviously we get a lot of parents come to us about their kids being in these types of situations too. And there is that fine line. And like we always talk about, we're not going at coaches on this one. We're trying to find that middle ground of where we can help coaches, but we can also help players understand that a lot of times that they're in that situation is also because they actually lack that ability sometimes. So when we see players, parents are upset that, their kid's not handling the ball in the games, but then you see their handle outside of games and they can't handle it at all. Versus in Benajay, and I only got to work with him the one time with you down in North Carolina, but even in that one time you could tell there was so much more to his game than just being just a role guy. And I think that's hard as a player too because obviously they got the lofty dreams, they've got the goals, and a guy like that, you looked at him and you could kind of tell like this guy has NBA potential for what it's worth. And, I think it's hard sometimes because if you're in his position, do you sit there and tough it out like a lot of the old head guys tell you to, where they're like, don't transfer, don't do this, sit there and fight through it. But I'm also in a position where, that could fail very poorly. And then obviously he transfers and finds big success at Syracuse. And I think that's one of the things that I think is toughest about these situations is, I'm sure there are some situations where players need to tough it out and prove themselves. But I think there's also situations where players, coaches are stingy sometimes. They might not let you ever break out of that mold because that's how they see you. So you might have to seek out a coach that says, Mike, I really like what you do with the ball. I think you could be a better player for us and have a different situation here. And obviously in his situation, it worked out great.
And I'm not against coaches, but at the same time, I'm extremely hard on them.
Yeah.
And most of the time when we talk with players, we don't hear a whole lot of love stories between coach and player. And I'm talking about every single level. I don't care what university you went to. We're dealing with NBA players who did not like their coaches, do not like their coach, and because this is always a battle that's going on. There's a conflict. And going back to the mic, and you had mentioned that he got to the point where he had all those tools. I don't know if they ever knew he had it.
Yeah.
Because when he first started training with us, he really didn't have a lot of that ball handling and footwork, but he wanted it. So we worked on it, we trained for it, and he became somebody in our workouts where it's like, hey, you got to get to a point where you're allowed to handle the basketball because you can. You got to get to a point where you're allowed to shoot it because you can. And that's why a new university, was needed for him. And a lot of players are stuck in this whole transfer portal dilemma because so often coaches are recruiting players, with the purpose in the coach's mind, you're going to be a role player for me, but they're not telling him that. And so they think that they're going to be able to be a certain player for them, but when they get there, it's surprise, surprise. You're no longer allowed to shoot it. You're no longer allowed to dribble it. And by the way, I didn't want you practicing those things. Yeah. We're not going to train those things because that's not your role. And so there's this issue that we have to coach players through all the time is you have to be able to navigate your team and the dream. And one thing that I'm always communicating to players, and we'll get to the coach's side in a little bit, is the player has to find a little bit of selfishness. That when it comes to my time and my development, it's all about me and my dream.
Yep.
There is nothing wrong with having a dream as a basketball player, and all the greats that got to the NBA, I can guarantee, had this trait, this little bit of a rebellious trait, that no matter what people are going to tell me, I'm going to train this, this, and this. I'm going to become this player regardless of what you say because that's what I want to do with this game. So players have to have that, and the selfishness comes on your own time. Then when you get to your team practices, you need to now be on their time. So if they want you to be a role player for that team, you're training according to that role. You're buying into that role. You're not rebelling necessarily in your practices.
Yeah.
And so that's the balance. So you're both coachable in practices and uncoachable with your own time.
We've always talked about that. It's 50-50. You're 50% coachable. You're 50% selfish a little bit. Because, again, like, coach might have drew up a play, and it's like, hey, swing it to the corner. But all of a sudden the ball gets to you and you're wide open. You got to take your chance. And then you just got to kind of live with it. You hit the shot, you look amazing. You miss the shot, you're probably going to hear a little bit something. But I think that's part of that confidence that, those certain players have that break the mold. We hear it with mid-range all the time. Don't shoot mid-range. Just talked to a college coach last night that was actually talking about one of our trainers. He's like, hated when he played for me because he kept shooting mid-ranges. And then a couple years into it, I figured out that's his best shot. So I let him shoot mid-ranges. So it's that part of it that I think it's hard for players to understand is like, if you're not rebellious at all and you don't show those qualities, okay, you might do it once or twice and get yelled at. As soon as you make it 3-4 times, it's the Steph Curry, Steve Kerr stories. Steph Curry shoots a 40-footer, and in the video, Steve Kerr's hands are up in the air, and he makes it. As a coach, you're going to kind of eventually be like, okay, like you got that, like go ahead.
So you have the rebellion in your training, and then at some point, if you feel like you're on the edge of pushing through, then you have the rebellion in the games.
Absolutely.
Where, what? If I'm going to be successful, I'm going to have to shoot the mid-range. We see this in the league all the time. A player gets drafted to be a certain player. They're stuck in a role. Then they just go ahead and start shooting the mid-range against the coach's wishes. And all of a sudden, they start having success. Now, the team might still be arguing against you. Hey, stop shooting that mid-range. It goes against the analytics. It goes against the system. You keep doing it, and all of a sudden, you become you're averaging 18 to 22 a game.
Yep.
They can't chase you out of town anymore.
Nope.
They can't sub you out. So you can kind of rebel your way into, more playing time. And a lot of times the coach doesn't believe that you can actually pull it off, and so you have to prove that you can in the game. And so there is going to be a balance of that too. So I would say in your training, that's where the rebellion starts.
Yeah.
Then in the game, you can pick and choose the areas of rebellion that is not going to go against the team. It doesn't mean your team's going to lose, but you're going to have to also look out for, where can I be in this team later on? And that can sound so countercultural. People can get so mad because they think that it's, this complete selfish thing and, everyone's a jerk who does that. But everybody on that team are individuals who want to go somewhere with the game of basketball. So before we go crazy with this, a lot of times when people do say, hey, it's team, 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 I don't want to hear about the individual stuff. I like to go back to the coaching side and say, Coach, you're a Division III coach. Are you so concerned about your team that you're going to pass up the Division I offer when you receive it? Every coach also has their own dream, and we don't tell them not to take those.
No, absolutely. It's understandable.
If that was the case, it'd be like, hey, don't go up to that next job. It's team, coach.
Yeah.
And so coaches have a hard time looking at players the same way. There's another level for them. You have to keep that in mind. Just like the coach will take the next opportunity when it comes, and some obviously do stay, but most of them are going to take the next opportunity when it comes because they have a dream that might even be more important than their current team, and that's life.
I mean, it's like getting a raise. Are you gonna turn down a raise? Like, I would have to question where your mentality is a little bit if there's a better situation for you. And again, there's some truth. The grass isn't always greener on the other side, but most of the time it kind of is. If I'm a Division III coach and I get offered a Division I job to a bigger school, it's got more money, I'm going to have more talented players, it's more than likely a better situation. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's why, again, like, I feel like there's such that side to this that it's like, it's okay for a coach to look out for themselves, but as soon as a player kind of looks out for themselves,
Selfish.
It's ridiculed. It's awful.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I'm going to tell all my kids to just stay at the first job they ever get.
Stay there.
Because that's the team. That's their role. Don't even move up.
Yep.
You know,
Stay right there.
The example I always use from the corporate world is, you know this, I was a janitor.
Yep.
When I was trying to just figure out
You should still be a janitor.
as a basketball trainer.
Still be there.
And so I had to do something in order to be early enough working that I could pursue the dream of Impossible and everything else that we ended up creating. And I can honestly tell you I never once practiced my mopping. In fact, I was the worst janitor probably that anyone has ever seen because I would do the job, but my head was always in basketball.
Yep.
I'd go in the janitor's closet, write notes, and develop things in the janitor's closet. And that was my dream. Could I have been a better employee? Absolutely, I could have been.
Definitely.
But no one ever gets mad at me for that. But the janitor job, that I was on a team.
Yep.
But I still had to have the selfish side of it, saying this isn't where I want to stay. A player could be on a team that right now is basically like a janitorial job to them. There's bigger and better things. And if a coach has their foot on their neck saying, no, it's team, 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 that player has to break out of it. What else do you expect them to do? But from a coach's side, let's give some solutions. So I'm not anti-coach, but I am negative coach.
Yeah.
Because I think coaches have to do better. I think they have a responsibility that they have to take on, and this is where it is you need to balance this yourselves. The big buzzword, if a coach was to ever write a book, they would use this word. They would say buy-in. If you can create buy-in, you're going to be a great coach. Yeah. However, the coaches who wrote those books on buy-ins, I'm talking to their players. They didn't have buy-in.
Yep.
The players did not necessarily enjoy them at all. They don't have a relationship with them at all. There was no buy-in. And so even those coaches, I think, struggle with what buy-in actually is. The players who did have the most buy-in were the players who got to do whatever the heck they wanted on the floor because they had
you loved your time at that point.
Yeah.
He was a great coach.
The players who you snuffed out their dreams, they never had buy-in, and you don't have a relationship with them. So how about this for a solution? So first thing that I would tell a coach is have a meeting with all of your players to discuss not only their role on the team, but to discuss their dreams. Ask them, what do you want to do after this? How far do you want to go? I think a lot of times coaches don't have those talks with their players because they're only concerned about the team. And so they're going to go to that player that's the eighth man, and they're going to say, this is your role, this is what I want you to do. And by the way, they don't believe that player has any potential anyway in the next level.
Yeah.
And so they ignore that player's dream altogether. They snuff it out. Instead, you can go, hey, do you want to play overseas? What do you want to do? Tell me. And then create a plan for that player's dream and how they need to work to get it. So every player should basically have two roles of development for that coach. The first one is, this is what I want you to do for this team right now. The second one is, this is what you should be doing if you're ever going to become the player you tell me you want to become. And a coach has to let go of that player's alone time. Have the team time be the role time for that player and have their time be their dream time. And if a coach would ever do that for all their players, I can guarantee you they'd have immediate buy-in. Even if that player didn't like their current role on that team, they might still have to rebel in those little moments in the game we talked about, but you'd have much better control and buy-in if you just gave them that opportunity. How many coaches have you ever heard have ever done anything like that?
No, not at all. And I think that's the hard part with like coaches and players right now is like I've never really heard of a coach, one, ever asking that with a player, and two, having any sort of a follow through with it. So like, every coach always goes with like, oh, it's the family, it's the buy-in. But I've never heard of too many times where a coach actually shows that level of care with a player. Now, I know coaches care about players, because especially off the court, like they don't want to see them get into bad situations. They don't want to see, their life go poorly. But it's kind of like what we've been talking about is like how many coaches actually have self-belief in players enough to actually feed their dream of, okay, this guy wants to go to the NBA. I may not believe he can make it there, but I'm definitely not going to stop his tracks of trying to develop him off the court. And I think that's where we're very much so about the players. That's how we've always trained. Like if a player, a trainer asked us the other night, like, okay, how do we start balancing this? This player comes to us and we want to feed them skills, but this is their role with their NBA team. And to me, it's a very simple answer is like, what does the player want? And we've had NBA players do that where they approach us, they try to give you the whole, like, this is what our coaches want. And then your answer has always been the same thing. Like, but what do you want? Like, what do you want out of this? And I think players have always kind of been, like, awestruck about that a little bit. Like, I'm visiting an NBA player next week, and I asked him, I'm like, what do you want to do with this time? Because I know you've been struggling with certain things. And his answer was he still wants to work on his goal of the type of player he wants to be in the NBA. And I think that's where you just get two totally different answers. Like, if you asked a player what they wanted out of themselves, and then you ask a coach what they want out of that player, you're going to get two totally different answers.
Well, one of the best situations or the best stories around this was when Billy Donovan came to watch my workout with Vic. So it was right when I started working out with Oladipo, and he came to watch the workout. And after the workout, basically came to me, said he liked it, enjoyed what we did, but he said, you know what, that's not what I want him doing. He is this player for us. He needs to work on ball screen reads and corner three all year round. And I respectfully told him that's not why I've been hired. That's not what we're going to do. And then I always joke that I got Vic traded because 2 weeks later he was traded to Indiana. And that was a situation, though, where the coach just wanted Vic to just do him. That's what I need him to do. So Vic was out there trying to get everything better. And this is nothing negative against Donovan.
Yeah.
It's just the reality is this is what coaches struggle with is I want this player to do this, and so I want their development to be around that. But the player says, I want more out of this league. I want more out of myself. I want more out of my role on this team. So, yeah, did we work on any ball screen reads? Not one the single off season. Did we work on the corner three? Yeah, we worked on shooting from everywhere. But, what's amazing is his ball screen reads went through the roof the next year because we worked on all the different skills.
He was like one of the top that year in like percentiles of like scoring or assisting the score, where like he was like top 5.
Without working on ball screen reads.
Him and Sabonis. Nasty combination.
Yep. Without working any of that.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't the ball screen reads that were his problem. So the coach sees ball screen read, ball screen read, ball screen reads. But we're seeing all the skills that are missing and the coordination, the timing, and the rhythm that's missing for those ball screen reads to action.
And I think that's one of those parts of it is like sometimes the issue isn't the issue. It's actually something going on over here. Like most players, I think passing is the most common one that coaches get frustrated about is because they're so limited in the types of passes they can make. Is like most kids see the pass, most pros see the pass. Like they saw that backdoor cut, but since they weren't equipped with the right skill of passing, they can't get that ball there. So they saw it, but they can't get it there.
It's not the situations that are needed. Yeah. It's the skills and the traits that are needed. And the coaches don't necessarily know how to do that. Coaches don't know skill. They only know, the eye test. They only know what they're seeing, and they can say, that player just doesn't move right. And we come in and see why they don't move right and how to fix it. Now, so the first thing I would say is coaches actually have to have the meeting with the player, and they actually have to care about their dream and allow them to work on their dream. Absolutely. And they will see that the player will still buy into the team and work on the role when the role is needed. The second thing is that even in practice time, that if I was a coach, this is how I would do it. If I didn't want anyone to shoot a fadeaway, I would have a fadeaway part of practice for 10 minutes. Because as we always say, you can't tell a player that a fadeaway is wrong, because they're going to see evidence of someone who proves that it's not. They're going to see Kobe. They're going to see MJ. They're going to see KD, these people who fade. And so you can't tell a player that's wrong. So if you're a coach who doesn't want to see the fadeaway, don't take it away. That's only going to cause more rebellion. You have to give the players a chance to practice on the things that you don't even want them to do. And so that's when you would say, okay, we're going to spend for the entire team the next 10 minutes working on a fadeaway. And let them do it and watch as they miss shots because they don't work on it. And you can even, if you want to, you can have, hey, if you can make above this percentage on this, I'll consider letting you shoot this in the game. And you can actually understand who actually should have that shot.
Which I think what that will also do, and I think that's what you're getting at, is like those guys that are making, let's say it was 10 shots. They make 1 out of 10. They're probably going to veer away from taking that shot in the game. But then your guys that are like, you're going to have some guys that hit 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 that you would never have thought hit that percentage. Now they've got confidence, and they're going to have, again, that self-belief that, okay, coach is a little all right with me taking this shot. So, again, that allows you to start, if you actually want to compartmentalize people and players a little bit, of like, all right, here's my guys that can really shoot that fadeaway. Here's my guys that can really take that, pull up off the three. And then it's fine, because as a coach, too, like, part of it is, like, also helping players know, like, the time and the place. Obviously, I don't want you shooting that turnaround fadeaway at a certain moment in the game because we're either trying to eat up clock or we're trying to do something within the offense that we're seeing. Like maybe we did want to get into the post. Big guy has a foul. We're trying to give him another foul, whatever. So like it allows you as a coach to look at it deeper and like your coaching of like, okay, we're at a part of this where, he's been hitting this shot all season, that we can actually feed towards that and it works within my offensive scheme.
Yeah, and what coaches need to understand, and we've mentioned this before, is that when you give them the skill, it doesn't mean they're always going to use it. Skills and IQ are two different things. And so,
Great way of putting it.
You don't want them to do it at the wrong times, and so because of that, you don't ever give it to them at all. And so like you said, if someone goes 1 for 10, now they've been shown that they're not even good at it. If a player just went 1 for 10, they're probably not going to shoot that in the game.
Probably not.
If you take it away, though, and you say, we're not practicing this, it's against the rules, it's not fundamental, it's wrong, they're going to rebel. Then it creates conflict the entire time because from the player's perspective, the coach is completely standing in the way of their dream now. And so if you allow them to actually train those weaknesses in practice, now you're part of their dream. You're allowing them to do it, and you're actually giving them chances to prove those skills to you. And obviously, we've heard stories of coaches doing this in the past where, I want you to shoot that 3. And if you can make a certain percentage, I'll let you shoot that 3 in the game. And so that especially used to be the case for bigs.
Yeah.
You're big, you want to shoot the 3? Well, show me that you can. Well, we need to do this with everything, even the things that coaches are calling not fundamental, and even the things that might be not that player's role. And what can happen is like a big who you never allow to dribble, when he puts that dribble down because he has to in the game, he turns it over because you've never allowed him to work on it. And so when you allow the big to work on his handle, it will allow his handle to be better, but he'll also understand it's not great. And so he won't use it as much. But when he does have to use it, he'll still have the ability to.
Yeah.
And so coaches need to create a plan to give their entire team more skills, create a threshold that they have to pass in order to use those skills. And now you're going to have a more functional team, players with better skills and better understanding of what they should and should not use.
Absolutely. And I think with the bigs, obviously, I think they get it the most where they get very pigeonholed on what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. And I think this goes for all different types of players. I think the majority of players want to broaden out their game. They want to expand their game. But you do have those select guys that like a Kyle Korver. Loved being a spot-up catch-and-shoot guy. I don't know if he actually himself really wanted to expand his game. That's what his role was. That's what he enjoyed doing. So that's who you are as a person. I think that's what gets hard for a lot of players. Like an Oladipo, they came to you. He wasn't satisfied with just being what they wanted him to. So now you have a player who's fighting like almost natural intuition of like, A, I'm not happy playing this way. And B, this is just not who I am as a person. And like, you know how it is. Like we can throw another great player. One of my favorite players of all time to work with, Evan Turner.
Oh, yeah.
Evan Turner, if you go back and you watch college tapes, unbelievable player. We joked about it the other day where he's like, sometimes I forget that I was that good. Because when he got into the NBA, every coach was trying to make him be something he wasn't.
And he was with the Sixers, and he was their guy, and that's when we were training him the most. He started to really do his thing.
Killing it.
He was close to an all-star level on a pretty bad team.
Yeah.
Right? But if he was allowed to continue playing like that,
oh
and
my
coaches
goodness,
didn't get in the way of his game, he was an absolute stud. And then we saw him get traded, and then teams start using him for all these other things.
Weird spots.
Yeah, and it almost took away his identity as a player, where I'm sure that Evan almost didn't remember what it was like to be Evan.
Yeah.
And that can happen to players when coaches take away things like that. But if you let them keep training it and you give them an environment where they can keep working on it, then they don't lose themselves.
Yeah.
I don't know if coaches really realize and fans really realize that when some players get to the NBA, they lose even the memory of how to play basketball their way. Their rhythm is gone.
We've heard that a lot from players.
Their feel is gone. Now they're a robot that has to do just these couple of things. And our whole point is yes, coaches, I get why you do this. This is your way to win games. It just doesn't have to be this way if you take just a few of these steps.
Yep.
So that's our goal in the whole team versus
Absolutely.
team. The players' side right now, players are being abused more. Players are in a worse spot. And so obviously we're coming to their defense quite a bit and we're helping them. And even though a lot of times we're going at coaches and saying, grow up, do it better, but this is the solution. And if you will balance the team and the dream, and you both know that this is a conflict that needs to be taken care of, it is healthier for the player, healthier for the team, and you will win more games.
It's healthier for the coach too, though. Like this is all in love of both sides. Like and like that's what we're trying to talk about here is just like, there can be a win-win situation for everybody, to where a coach doesn't have to sacrifice this, a player doesn't have to sacrifice this. Everybody's just got to be able to get on the same page of how do we go about getting this situation to work for both. Because I don't know about you, I have sat in these talks where coaches come and recruit my players, and they start it like it's going to be that. And then they get there, and it's all about player sacrifice. The player's got to sacrifice. Where there's got to be a little bit of both in there. There's got to be times that, a coach finds an opportunity to let a player shine. You got to let that player shine a little bit.
Yep, and coaches, I'll just say this as we close this up. Start training your players with skill. Get some understanding of what skills are and all the different options that are out there. Don't just be the coach that just does jump stops and just one or two or three other things and just play your X's and O's. And if you need help with that, we have a trainer certification and we have a trainer university that we have coaches, Division I coaches, 2, 3, have all come in. European coaches have all come in to go through our program. So that is a solution for you. And we have other things coming out that you can take advantage of. But learn skill. And players, if you're dealing with this, we're there with you. It's hard. It's tough. It's a tough balance. And so if you have a situation right now where a coach is limiting your dream and you don't know how to break out of it, reach out to us and we can help you through this as well. And so that is something that's going to continue to be a topic we talk about on this show. Dream Loudly is about helping players dream, and that's going to go with coaches, trainers, and players. But if you need help with your dreams, reach out to us. We're here to help. We'll see you next time.